Good evening. Wigan, the very mention of its name brings a smile to the faces of those who know it not. Well, they should laugh. The Romans used to call it Coccium. Perhaps they too thought that Wigan sounded funny. But it is a very old name, ancient British, not Anglo-Saxon, and Wigan itself is a very old place. It stands here, roughly halfway between the crossing of the Mersey and the crossing of the Ribble. It is the natural stop on the main road north. It has, or has had, everything that a town worthy of the name should have. A Roman fort, a Benedictine monastery, an Elizabethan grammar school, and in the Middle Ages it was one of only 4 parliamentary boroughs in Lancashire. Preston, Liverpool and Lancaster were the other 3. In the Canal Age, it was linked to Liverpool and to Leeds by this great Liverpool-Leeds Canal, the greatest canal that they built before they built the Manchester Ship Canal. After the excitement of the opening of the Manchester-Liverpool Railway, Wigan was the first town to be connected to that railway, and then the line went on to Preston and beyond. And because it had such excellent communications, and because it stood 4 square on the Lancashire coalfield, which is all this shaded area, Wigan became Lancashire's greatest mining town, the capital of the most energetically worked coalfield in Britain. Oh, I know they talk about the Northumberland coalfield in Scotland and Wales and Yorkshire, but it was the Lancashire coalfield was the one that was really used. And in the 19th century, the population of Wigan doubled and doubled and doubled again. But the broken seams of its coalfield made it less and less economic to mine, and the pits closed one by one, leaving Wigan with the dereliction. It is still to this day a miner's town, but it is no longer a mining town. It is not, I hasten to add, however, a ghost town. It is, as we shall see in a moment, the busy centre of a metropolitan borough. And even the motorist who hurtles past on the M6 is aware that nowadays Wigan means beans. But why, after such a long and lively history, should its name still raise a smile? Well, Frank Mellor went to see for himself. And you know, he thinks he has the answer.
Wigan, the music hall joke, the town that once evoked the archetypal image of an oppressed and exploited north. For some strange, convoluted reason, the mere mention of its name was calculated to cause hoots of misplaced merriment from pit to gallery for half a century. But why Wigan? Why not Bury or Blackburn or Boggart Hole Clough?
You've got to bowl through Wigan on a train to find the answer. For it was while skimming across its rooftops that countless millions of people formed their indelible impression of it. Long before smoke abatement was fashionable and the back-to-back stretched to infinity, one observant rail traveller noted that of all the industrial towns of Lancashire, Wigan alone was spread out in all its majestic black murk below the London to Glasgow expresses.
Could this be why, of all the industrial towns, Wigan should find itself at the butt end of overplayed humour? George Orwell found it to be a most unfunny town when he detrained here in the mid-30s. He spent 6 weeks in dingy lodgings, crystallising the depressing poverty of his road to Wigan Pier. The Orwellian back-to-backs are slowly receding, along with the slag heaps. But George Formby's window cleaner is still around, and Wigan retains a stoic regard for the black pudding, while losing its zest for tripe and trotters. Gastronomic perception is evolving with the skyline, but all in all, as industrial towns go, Wigan continues to have no pier, if you see what I mean. It's like any other obsolete canal, thin pea soup flanked by tumble-down warehouses. A century or two ago, the local populace went for day trips on barges from near here, and legend has it that there was once a jetty known as the Pier. And that really is extremely funny. At least George Formby, father of the When I'm Cleaning Windows George Formby, thought so. And whenever he mentioned Wigan Pier, his music hall audiences split their sides. It was the sheer improbability of a Wigan Pier that prompted the joke that perpetuated the myth. And threadbare though the joke has become, Wigan has been stuck with it ever since. By popular consent, this is where Wigan Pier would have been if there ever was one. But the most likely explanation is that there were 3 or 4 piers along the canal through the town, and colliery wagons converged on them for their coal to be tipped into barges. For the Wigan coalfield was once the busiest, most productive in the world. Hundreds of pit wheels spun a filigree against the sky, but those days are far in the past, and coal mining now is confined to a handful of pits just outside the old borough boundary. One or two are small privately owned collieries, like this one at Billinge, with 30 men working underground. It's a drift mine, which means that the miners can walk the 3/4 of a mile to and from the face, and it's producing around 25,000 tonnes of steam coal a year from a fractured seam the coal board would hardly consider economic. It's loaded into wagons and carted off to help fire a local power station. A man who remembers the Wigan coalfield in its heyday is the pit's managing director and mine of mining lord, Donald Anderson.
I think in about 1920 there were 27,000 miners employed in the Wigan area. That's, say, about 5 miles radius from the centre of Wigan.
Originally, the Wigan coalfield was very important, of course.
Yes, well, it was probably the most important part of the Lancashire coalfield. Very concentrated. There were pits every half mile, and major collieries at one time. They were very close together because there were so many seams. In the deepest part of the coalfield there are about 22 seams, workable seams, so that it paid a capitalist to sink shafts on a very small area.
How much coal are you producing here from the Quaker House colliery?
Well, about 500 tonnes a week.
There's still an awful lot left then.
There's a lot in this district because this was an old part of the coalfield, and they worked the very best seams out and then didn't bother afterwards, and they've left quite a lot that's worth working these days.
So how many shafts would there be in the old borough then?
Well, they have records of well over 1,000, but there are no records of many hundreds besides that. They keep coming across them, especially on building sites, and some that just fall in.
What about this Canal coal, which had quite a name?
Well, that was, it's a consistency like jet, and they used to be able to carve it into various objects. And they made candlesticks and all kinds of things. In fact, at Hay Hall, they said they had a dinner served once on Canal plate, on plates and
Made out of the coal?
Made out of the coal. And then when they finished the dinner, I suppose they had a few drinks at the time, they threw them all on the fire.
And it burned very well.
Yeah.
And this is what he's talking about. That is made of coal, cannel coal. They say that the name cannel comes from candlelight, because this very hard coal burned so well and left so little ash. Indeed, they used to export huge lumps of it to the United States of America, and they would burn one instead of a Yule log. But back home in Wigan, they regarded it almost as a precious stone. And that is why they carved it. Yes, they made plates and cups and saucers and even teapots out of it. And there is a story goes, and I'm told it is absolutely true, that a man once built a summer house of it in the gardens of Hay Hall, and it stood for 100 years. This stuff, cannel coal. But the other thing that they made in Wigan, the great artifact, was pewter. Now, there's nothing unique about pewter in the sense that it was made in many parts of the country, but that very beautiful plate, which was made in 1687, was made in a town which in those days was second only to London as the great producer of pewter in the kingdom. And all the people who were anybody in Wigan were in the business. All the people who were on the local council, about 4 aldermen at any given time, were likely to be pewterers. And they were always arguing because the tin used to go from Cornwall to London cheaper than it came to Wigan. And then, of course, the whole trade fell away. But if you really want to know what Wigan was like in the past, I suppose you have to look at old photographs. It's a great tragedy they didn't invent photography until the middle of the 19th century, because we would love to have known what it was like when they were making these kind of things. But we do know what it was like for the past 100 years. One man who's made a great collection of photographs of Wigan is John Hanavy from the college, the Tech in Wigan. John, is it a well-documented town, Wigan? I mean, are there lots of photographs of it?
Yes, there are quite a lot.
Going a long way back, or...?
Well, the bulk of them are post-1905, when the postcard era started, because Wigan had dozens and dozens of postcards.
It makes that joke about the pier seem even more relevant, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, we brought some of your pictures. Let's have a look at them. Where, for instance, is that?
That is the top of Walgate in 1902.
And was that then the main street? And this?
I presume so, yes. That is Market Street, about 1900. Just coming into shot is The tram, early steam trams were actually made in Wigan. That's not a steam tram, but they did make steam trams at Hay.
Yes, it led the field in many ways. Now, this is the famous market hall that everyone's fighting about at the moment.
Yeah. This is 1914, I think, when King George V arrived in Wigan. As you can see, the market hall was the sort of civic gathering place for any large events like this.
So the royal family didn't shrink from coming to Wigan in spite of the jokes?
No, King George V on that particular visit, and the Prince of Wales came, as we see here, in 1897.
Yes, for a moment I thought that was the Prince of Wales' legs at the front, but in fact he's in the back, isn't he?
Yeah.
And this is the man, the one who became, what, Edward VII?
Yes, yes.
Not indeed Edward VIII.
That's him coming out of Walgate Station.
Now, I have not mentioned, and I ought to have done, of course, that Wigan was not only coal but cotton.
Yes, these are from a series of postcards produced in, we think, Coop's mill about 1905 to 1908. There were about 20 postcards of mill girls at work, which clearly were sold throughout the country.
Yeah, and of course, if you're sitting right on a coalfield with all those coal mines, it makes sense to have your mills there as well.
Yes,
not to mention, you know, the railways and the canals to keep everything moving. And this one?
These are pit girls. These girls worked at the pit head, grading the coal and picking out the lumps of stone.
In colour, curiously.
Yes, they're coloured by hand when the postcard was made, and then the printing actually done in colour on the postcard.
But I gather that in Wigan they maintain girls working in the mines. They're not down in the mines much longer than anywhere else.
I believe so, yes. In fact, in the 1920s they had dozens, well, not just dozens, but the largest group of women working in the pits in any area of the country.
Well, thank you for letting us see the photographs. Can we just have a look at one more, because it does seem to me this sort of archetypal picture of Wigan. The Wigan coal mine, and now, of course, gone. But although Wigan is not a mining town, it is still very much in the mining industry.
The pick and shovel collier of old kept a roof over his head with the wooden pit prop that cost a shilling or two. Now, coal is sliced like bacon, and the modern pit prop is an automated marvel of hydraulics worth anything up to £20,000. There can be a couple of hundred of them drawn up in close order along a coal face. In 25 years, the Wigan-engineered Gullick-Dobson roof support has helped revolutionise the world's mining industry. Company chairman Alan Kay.
The company's origins go back to a small company in the 1920s when they were servicing the coal mines around Wigan. And really this product and this company has grown from those very small days. These are going to China. They're part of a large contract that we obtained about a year ago for £10 million. And in a few days, these will be on a boat to China.
But it doesn't represent a very large proportion of your total output, does it?
Well,
£10 million?
No, this particular contract is about just short of 10% of our total annual output, yes.
Who are your biggest customers?
Oh, the coal board, of course, in this country. But we do have quite a good market overseas, probably about 20% of our total output. Oh, goes to all the mining countries in the world, yes.
Is this the first order you've had from China?
No, this is the second one. We had one in 1972 and 73, very large order then. We were the first British company to obtain a mining order in China, and this is now a repeat.
This must have been quite a breakthrough, selling all this sort of sophisticated equipment to China.
Yes, it's a very difficult task. It takes many, many months of negotiations. One has to be very patient, but the rewards at the end of the day are quite great.
They're obviously intent on a lot of modernisation of their coal industry.
The Chinese economy is under great scrutiny at the moment, and I think they have placed energy generally at the top of their priority list. And of course, coal mining features greatly in that.
What kind of a spurt is there going on at the moment in the coal industry as a result of the oil crisis, the energy crisis generally?
Well, there's a tremendous increase in the British coal mines to maximise production, and of course there's an equally great pressure on us to supply equipment to help them to do it.
Is this the ultimate way of mining coal, do you think, or are there still more sophistications ahead?
Well, our mining engineers feel that in the next 20 years, we shall look forward to improving the current system rather than really finding quite different methods of mining coal.
Pits will need props as long as buses need bodies, and Wigan has been attaching the coachwork to the wheels of Britain's bus fleets for 60 years. Northern Counties has built quite a reputation in public transport, while building everything from hand-cranked antiques to those super smoothies which glide from Ancoats via Ardwick to Acacia Avenue. Director and General Manager David Cherry.
When they put the engine from the front and put it in the back, this is when the designs change.
And of course everybody gets on at the front.
Everybody gets on at the front, the driver takes the fares. It allowed us to give a wider door, a better door, a flat floor, a better step entrance. It quietened the vehicle because taking the engine to the back, and generally completely changed the design.
And of course, instead of the old-fashioned conductor, the driver's got all kinds of things to hand now, all bits of gadgetry, electronics and radio, telephone and goodness knows what.
Yes, he has his telephone, he's in contact with his base, he has his gears, he has his switchboard by the side of him, all designed so that they come easily to hand.
Getting more and more like the cockpit of an aircraft, really.
Oh, yeah, yes, not quite as much, but it's certainly more like a private car.
And upstairs we go. My dear, it's, they really are very nicely finished, aren't they, buses these days? What about passenger comfort on these? Very obviously the seats are attractive. They're upholstered in a very attractive sort of cloth, and there seems to be a bit of vandal-proofing that goes into them too.
Yes, the seats are obviously paramount importance. We've got to make sure there's plenty of space. We've got to make sure that the cushion's comfortable. We also make sure that they're flame-proofed as well, so that there's no danger from fire. As far as the remainder of the vehicle is concerned, we have a lot of melamine finishes around the area. Vandal-proof, they can't be damaged easily.
You cover the seats these days in a sort of moquette cloth rather than the old leather cloth. There's a reason for that, psychological one, isn't there?
Well, it is thought that not only is it more attractive, but it reduces the vandalism.
Why is that?
Well, I really don't know. I think it's probably because the moquette makes people feel as though they're at home in their own lounge, perhaps.
And they're less likely to start tearing the seats apart. And there are obviously a lot of other considerations that go into bus body building these days.
Oh yes, we have to comply with the construction and use regulations laid down by the Department of Transport, or Ministry of Transport now. And we concentrate very much on the safety angle. We have full stanchions in the vehicle. We have the safety rails on top of the seats. We have this non-slip floor.
Of course, they're fireproof.
Yes, fireproof. There isn't much timber in the vehicle these days, but of course the floors are timber. All these are treated with a compound called loxoline, which is a fireproofing compound. All the rubber we use in the seats, all the seat covers are flame-proofed. All the adhesives we use to stick the melamine finishes on the seat backs, on the side lining panels, all flame-proof.
And of course I believe you can tilt a bus to a crazy angle without it even falling over.
Yes, all buses have got to pass a tilt test. And the double-deck passes a tilt test of 28 degrees. And in fact, they go to well over 35 degrees. It's not often the double-deck bus turns over. But
bus design's come an awful long way since your company first started building bus bodies.
Started building bodies in 1919 when the company was first formed. We built cars and hearses in those days, and we went on to bus bodybuilding in the 1920s, and our first double-deck was 1928, which was on a Maudsley chassis. Little heating, probably mainly, well, pretty well all timber, in fact.
Square wheels as well?
Not quite, but...
Britain, of course, was the first country to introduce the double-deck bus, so I suppose we know more about constructing them than anyone else. Do you think there's a future for the double-deck bus in the export market?
Yes, in certain countries they're using a lot more double-decks, in places like Hong Kong and Singapore, and in the Middle East countries. And we, in fact, built one for Kuwait early this year, and that is on trial out in the Middle East now.
Are you thinking you may be pushing exports in the near future?
In the future, perhaps we will, when we have our new workshop built at Pemberton.
Wigan's good old days were so long ago that everyone's forgotten how bad they were. It clings to a town centre that defies development, chuckles at an image it knows to be distorted, and delves much deeper than mine and mill to find its roots, into a history symbolised by its parish church. The rector is Malcolm Forrest.
It really is a most noble pile, isn't it, to be found right in the centre of a town like Wigan?
Well, Wigan is a real town, and it's an ancient town, so it's got an ancient church in the middle of it.
How old is it?
Very old. It's a Saxon foundation, certainly, and it's extended and been adapted and developed and added to over the years.
It must have held a very strategic position in the area at one time. It seems to be on about the only hill that's around Wigan.
Right in the middle of the bend in the river, it had a parish of many, many square miles. There are 30 modern parishes carved out of it. And it was a defensive spot. It was probably the site of a Roman town originally, and the church is built on that site.
I believe the rectors of Wigan have had some rather strange powers in the past. What is it, an ecclesiastical assize that they're allowed to hold?
Well, something like that. There's a charter of Edward III which gave the rector the right to try anybody within his manor who did anything at all. And I think, in fact, bring malefactors back from other jurisdictions to his court.
Surprise the local magistracy if you were to take up the powers once more.
I'd love to be able to do it for a day or two, but not too often.
The setting for the Wigan Metropolitan School's brass band is just a stride along the road from Wigan Pier. The same road that leads to Hay Hall, once the seat of the Earls of Crawford, coal owners and ironmasters. The estate is now a country park, and it belongs, hall and all, to the borough. Wigan people then still feel as if they can identify themselves with their town.
It's their town, you know, they enjoy it, they like it, and I think most people would hate to see insensitive development. If things can be done well in Chester or Salisbury or Canterbury, why not Wigan? It's a good place. Keep the best.
Your civic society are obviously resisting change in the town centre.
The Civic Trust, I think, sees need for change and improvement, but I use the word again, sensitive, selective, careful. You know, the mine owners came, they took everything away, and they've vanished. I'd hate a wave of retailers to come and take away and not give to the town. Leave it as a town for people to live in rather than simply to shop in.
Do you think Wigan has been very badly exploited in the past?
I think it is a long history of exploitation, and I'd hate to see the next wave of exploitation be one that ruined the town completely.
Well then, will the retailers be the next vandals and plunder Wigan? The leader of the council is Bernard Coyle, and when I say the council, of course, no longer the town council, it's the Metropolitan Borough Council. But are you going to let the retailers in? They've ruined a fair number of towns in the northwest.
Well, I don't think they would ruin ours. We think it's essential that the town centre is rejuvenated again because it's contracting rapidly, and if something's not done, we're going to lose a very valuable source of rateable value.
But what about this market hall? I gather everyone's very cross with the plan you have for that.
Well, mind you, it's only a personal opinion, but I fail to see any merit whatsoever in the market hall. At one time, it was quite an attractive building. It used to be flanked by glass verandas, supported by very ornate cast iron pillars. And people used to congregate under there at the weekend, and it was something worth seeing. But now it's buttressed by lean-tos, shops been built onto it, and any merit it had, as far as I'm concerned, is long gone.
And yet, do you see its future of Wigan then only as a shopping centre?
Oh, no. Wigan itself?
Yes.
Well, as the rector said, it was exploited in the past, no doubt about it. What I would like to see now is present-day industrialists to come along and exploit it in the sense, use this excellent labour force which we've got in Wigan, take advantage of the industrial development status which we've just been granted, and I think we can really get going in Wigan.
It's not the danger, though. I mean, it's not a danger. Great if you provide jobs, but the awful feeling you have of a place like Wigan that it will never be itself again, that it'll be like so many other places.
No, I don't think Wigan will ever be like so many other places. I think in some way this film has done something to dispel the image which we've had, an image which was quite deserved in the past. Reference was made to George Orwell, and as somebody who grew up in the surroundings which George Orwell described, in a back-to-back terraced house, outside toilet, no bathroom, you know, I think it takes somebody like me to appreciate the changes of which have happened in Wigan. And I think we've not done all we need to do yet. There's much more to be done yet to improve the environmental aspects of it, but I think that it'll never lose its basic character.
Good. Well, now, I understand you've got a lad who plays rugby league.
That's right.
Scrum half in the local team. Well, you'll know this lady, then, because this is Jackie Makinson, believe it or not, secretary of Wigan Rugby League Club. I believe when you got the job, Eddie Waring went white, but it's all right. Is there still as much interest in, after all, a very man's game like rugby league in Wigan as there used to be when it was, you know, more of a miners' town?
Yes, I think all Wigan needs is a winning rugby league team, and the whole town revolves around a winning rugby team.
And have you not been winning lately?
We had a pretty lean season last year, but even so, we finished 5th in the league.
You don't see the future as being a bit too genteel? I mean, when he gets all these shops and it's all nice and clean and it's full of Tupperware and baked beans and things, that maybe nobody will want rugby league?
Oh, no, certainly not, because then they will want somewhere to go to get out the aggravation that they can't take out in the town centre. So they will come and shout at the rugby team.
If you can't take it out of Lumber Coal Underground, you can do it on the top. Well, we've also got with us Ian McNeill, who is manager of Wigan Athletic. Now, is there room for 2 sports in the town?
Yes, Brian, there's most certainly room. It's a sports-minded town, and I think a successful rugby side and a successful football side can go together.
I remember when you got from being whatever the status is before you get in the league into going into the 4th division, there was great enthusiasm everywhere, as if you'd won and a massive support.
Yes, well, I think when you take 35 years of trying to get into the Football League, I think it was a great sign for the town, because eventually I think Wigan can go all the way to the 1st division. And I think then we could be able to see whether it's a rugby town or a soccer town. And I feel that it'll be a soccer town.
I'm glad you said that and didn't leave me to say it. I would like to be able to say that I think Wigan is a 1st division kind of town anyway. I don't just mean in football, I mean in everything, don't you think?
Agreed.
Good. We're not going to allow people to say rude things about it anymore.
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you all very much for joining me tonight. Wigan, where next? Now, rumour has it that Mellor had a very wild day out. True, it was a very wet day, but it was at Grasmere Sports. When they've dried out the film and dried out Mellor, we'll put it all together in a programme for next week. So next week, having been at Wigan, let's go back to the Lake District to Grasmere Sports, home ground. I hope you'll watch. Good night.